Alrighty, fellas, Bindley here, and this afternoon I'll be talking to you guys about Punnett squares. And to get started, let's take a look at the chromosome pair I jotted down here. And just to kind of keep things running smoothly, I just said let's just pretend this is a guy. Okay, that's the little male symbol over there. So here we have a chromosome pair, and I labeled it chromosome pair 1 just to keep it simple. Okay, and on this pair, you see one gene that says big B, and on its homolog or complementary pair, you see a gene that says little b. Now, to be very clear, I've always taught you that each homolog is a twin of the other, okay? So that's sort of true, but I want to clear that up briefly. So in this particular example, these are the genes for hair color. Big B represents the dominant brown-haired gene. Little b represents the recessive blonde-haired gene. So they're not exactly the same bits of information, but it's the gene for hair color nonetheless. That's why they are homologs. They're carrying the same gene, just perhaps different versions of that gene. So brown-haired versus blonde hair. Okay, so here we have a guy who has one of each. And let's see, y'all can see that. So what I did here, let's just remove the chromosomes and kind of get more into the nuts and bolts of Mendel and just write out the pair, big B, little b. So this fella marries a young, lovely lady, and she's also, of the same combination of big B, little b. So now let's go ahead and see what the probabilities for their kids are going to be. So that's what you see there, a Punnett square. I'm hopeful that you've seen something like this in the past. So let's walk through it. First off, it doesn't matter which parent goes on the top or on the side of this square. In this case, they're both the same, so it really doesn't matter. But even if they were different, it still doesn't matter. It's like I've always said, 2 plus 3 equals 5, 3 plus 2 equals 5. It's the same 5. It's going to add up the same nonetheless. So let's add these two together. And the rule is when you put them in the squares, the capital or dominant trait goes first. So big B plus big B, big B, big B, okay? Big B, little b, big B, little b. And then finally the last little square here, I'm gonna circle it. Those are the recessives. That's the possibility of having the 1 out of 4 kiddo who's gonna be blonde. So with that said, I need to really make sure we are clear on some of the vocabulary. So, I have four possible kiddos in here. Hopefully you all see that. 4 squares represents 4 possible kiddos. One of them has both of the dominant traits, the big B, okay? And that's what I wrote here. That term is going to be homozygous dominant. Big B, one of those homozygous dominant. Then I had 2, which in this case resemble the parents. They are heterozygous. Hetero means one of each. So 2 that are big B, little b. And finally, I have this dude that I circled, or dudette, you never know, and that is the blonde homozygous recessive. So I have 2 different terms here with homozygous, but they are opposites. In fact, one's homozygous dominant because it has the 2 browns. The other one's homozygous recessive because it has the 2 blonde alleles or genes or traits. Okay, I gotta make sure you can see this here. Okay, I think that's somewhat clear. So that's going to lead me to a couple of other vocabulary terms. You have something called the phenotype. Okay, we can keep this kind of generic, but I'm going to expand on it slightly. The phenotype is the way you look. So on the previous example, we were talking about hair color. So if you were brown-haired, okay, that's your phenotype. You have the phenotype for brown hair. That one that I circled, the blonde one, they have the phenotype for blonde hair. But like I said, we do need to expand on this a little bit. So if you notice, I also wrote, it's the gene or allele, if you want to use that Mendel term, the gene or allele that is expressed. For example, you might wear glasses. You might have inherited heart disease. You might have asthma. Okay, these aren't features that you necessarily see as part of your outward appearance, like hair color or eye color, but those are still the genes that are expressed, hence those are still important components of one's phenotype. Now we get to the genotype. That refers to both sets of alleles. Okay, so let's run through this one more time, the same example, and I want to see how we use the terms phenotype and genotype. So that was the same Punnett square, okay, big B, big B, big B, little b, big B, little b, finally. I'll circle it again, little b, little b. But now we have to apply a better understanding of the terms phenotype and genotype. So you'll notice I put P. So from now on, when you do a Punnett square problem, you're going to write P, colon, and then whatever your phenotypic ratio is going to be. So let's ask ourselves quickly, how many of these start with a capital B? This one, this one, this one. Remember, we always put the capital or dominant gene first. So that's why I wrote the number 3 right there. 3 of them are going to have brown-haired. One of them is the blonde. So of course it's not 3 out of 4. We don't write it that way. We write a 3-to-1 ratio. So these two numbers should always add up to 4, just to represent your 4 squares. So remember that. I see a lot of students who write 3 colon 4. Incorrect. It's 3 colon 1, and that 1 represents the blonde. Now we get to the genotype, both sets of alleles. So let's ask ourselves, fellas, how many of those have a big B, big B? So we're going to start with the most dominant combination first. How many have a big B, big B? 1. How many are big B, little b? Well, we have the 2 heterozygotes. And then how many are big B, little b? The blonde kiddos. And that adds up to 4 as well, okay? And it's a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So far, so good. Let's do one more practice problem. Let's take one of these heterozygous kids, big B, little b, and that dude goes on and marries a lovely, beautiful blonde woman. Again, doesn't matter what parent we put on top. You see what we added, right? So big B, little b, bang. Little b, bang. Big B, little b, bang. Little b, bang. What's our phenotypic ratio going to be? In other words, how many of the kids are brown-haired? 2. How many are blonde-haired? 2. How many are going to start, now for the genotype, how many start with big B, big B? None. That's why I put the 0. How many are big B, little b? Those 2. And how many are little b? Those 2. 0, 2 to 2. That's your ratio. It adds up to 4. So I want to be real clear one last time. In terms of the phenotype, big B, and big B, little b are the same. I hope that makes sense. I'll talk to you later. Peace out.